everyone. I wanted to use this video to spotlight 5 metal albums that are pretty obscure, including not being on Spotify. Love it, hate it, or begrudgingly embracing it, Spotify provides the average metalhead access to nearly every album you could ever want to listen to, including a lot of very obscure releases that even 10 years ago could only be found on Bandcamp and MySpace and Pure Volume. And I should stop before y'all figure out how old I really am. But Spotify hasn't managed to get their money-grubbing hands on all of the best albums in extreme music, including these 5 that are well worth listening to on pseudo-legal YouTube videos, Bandcamp, or wherever else you can find them. First up is Youth Attack by Charles Bronson, right here. Martin Sarandagay of Los Crudos and Limp Wrist is someone who's very committed to his principles, as showcased by his great Beyond the Screams documentary on Latino hardcore music, and as showcased by how he ran the record label Lengua Armad Discos, which put out the first album on this list, Youth Attack, by seminal power violence band Charles Bronson. Outside of maybe Spaz, Charles Bronson has the most influential band in the first and very short-lived wave of power violence music in the early 90s, spawning many great successors in the genre, like Orchid in the late 90s and Threadner in the early 2000s. Threadner was originally going to be on this list, but apparently Spotify snatched up their one album that compiled their 3 EPs, The Hammering, The Fastening, and The Bending of Throats. Charles Bronson's only full-length album finally gave them some basically competent recording to capture their unbridled, snarky energy. Along with their comrades like Spaz and Capitalist Casualties, they provided a great challenge to the parallel death metal and grindcore scenes that were also trying to be as fast and brutal and unrelenting as possible. Number 2 on this list is Super Collider by Cavity. Similarly committed to the DIY anti-corporate ethos is the great Hydra Head Records, which has put out a lot of the most interesting releases in metal, probably because it was run by the legendary metal musician Aaron Turner, who unfortunately went into a lot of debt running this label and had to stop putting out new music accordingly. I know some of their stuff used to be on Spotify. I've definitely listened to American Nervoso by Botch on Spotify, but it looks like a lot of that stuff got removed, and as far as I'm aware, this record, Super Collider by Cavity, was never on Spotify. And before anyone tries to correct me, no, this album was originally put out by Man's Ruin Records, but Hydra Head owns it. And oh boy, is this album a testament to why you shouldn't limit your metal listening to Spotify. Super Collider is probably my favorite sludge metal album of all time, and I say that as a huge fan of Melvins, 16, I Hate God. Like, these are all in my top metal bands of all time, but I don't think any album for me just nails that sound of sludge metal, the heavy, fuzzy, trudging, powerful sound more perfectly than Super Collider does. It is the epitome of a deep-cut, real heads type record, a treasure that you have to search to earn, and as much as it annoys me to not be able to cue it on Spotify sometimes, maybe it's better off that way to retain that feeling of accomplishment it imparts on music nerds like me. Number 3 is Tokyo Anal Dynamite by the Gero Gary Gegege. Honestly, this list for me could have been all Japanese harsh noisecore and been 25 albums long, but hey, I gotta make sure my 5 viewers aren't alienated from the channel with music that is unlistenable to the vast majority of people. Tokyo Anal Dynamite has just enough structure to still be within the realms of noise punk or noisecore and not the more ambient harsh noise like Merzbow or Uttercock. Yes, as in an udder like a cow and cock like penis. Grindcore karaoke was truly a wonderland of music. Anyways, the most often cited and joked about structure to Tokyo Anal Dynamite is the countdown that begins each song of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, with the singer's voice already approaching screaming by the time he gets to the 3, 4. But if you listen carefully, you can hear melodies and rhythms like spotting obscured moving objects in a blizzard. Never clear enough to be able to tell what it actually is, only able to tell the faint outline of something that's there. And it's why I love listening to it. Every listen has a sort of a Sisyphean quality to it of trying to grasp something that is always out of reach. Number 4, Creation and Destroy by D-Clone. Alright, I already warned you that this could have been 25 albums of Japanese noisecore, so I think I'm showing a lot of restraint by only doing 2. And I have to do Creation and Destroy because it is probably the best recording that captures the feeling of a live, noisy D-Beat show. And folks, noisy D-Beat shows might be my favorite kind of shows. Music that's all about drive and energy and righteous anger obviously is great for live music, but it can also be a challenge for recordings as you don't have that feedback loop of a charged up and probably drunk as fuck crowd re-energizing the band in their performance. D-Clone is kind of an ironic name because they're very much not clones of other D-Beat bands, possessing their own particularly heavy and intro-outro centered style of D-Beat. The centering of the intros and outros in particular really keeps the music sounding fresh and the listener energized even without the crowd, something even genre founder Discharge understood to a certain extent with songs like Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing, A Hell on Earth, and The Blood Runs Red, giving the listener a shot of adrenaline in their intros to make it through 14 songs that are essentially the same chords and rhythms rearranged like Mad Libs. D-Clone is one of the few D-Beat bands I've seen nail this formula, and their absence on Spotify just goes to show that if you want some of the best bands in a given genre, it won't necessarily be on the streaming site. And number 5, we have Flood by Boris. Boris's discography is largely on Spotify at this point, with some exceptions, but it has been a gradual process, I'm sure due in no small part to the fact that an album like Akuma no Uta can win favor with even the Pitchfork crowd, but an album like Amplifier Worship is a bit more challenging. So it isn't a surprise that one of the holdouts in inclusion is also one of the albums that is the most unfriendly to the Spotify algorithm-driven model. Spotify is about making music convenient. Don't know what song to pick? Choose from a pre-made playlist. Feeling bored with your current Feeling bored with your current music? Discover new music via more pre-made playlists. Spotify measures how successful a song is based on the total number of plays and how recent the plays are from each other, aka if you suffer by Napalm Death on repeat 5,000 times, it will climb the ranks. I mean, I'm sure their algorithm has probably already come up with some way to screen grindcore songs like that, so they don't wind up on a normie's playlist. But I still think that we as a metal community should come together just to see if we can play Spotify's algorithm by all playing You Suffer on repeat for 1 day straight. Anyways, a single 70-minute long track is not conducive to Spotify's model. And a single 70-minute long track is exactly what Flood is. Specifically, the most beautiful 70 minutes I have probably ever listened to. And it really highlights something important about getting off Spotify, at least sometimes. Listening to music can certainly be a helpful aid to get through work, or a bus ride, or whatever. But music should be listened to actively as well as passively. That's why I love talking about music and trying to share things about music with other people. I think listening to music actively is one of the great joys that humans can experience in their brief and otherwise painful lives. Something like Flood is so great because it refuses to be listened to passively. It's an experience that compels the listener to make a conscious decision of, okay, I'm going to put on Flood. Sure, some people like to supplement the act of listening with mind-altering substances. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but if that's you, I would also strongly encourage you to listen to it completely sober, at least once. And you may be surprised by how many of the feelings it draws out of you happen regardless of whether or not you've taken psychedelics. So yeah, in conclusion, log off Spotify, metalheads. There's a whole other world of music still out there beyond that seemingly endless corporate streaming catalog of music.